That's what's really cool about the whole recording process as well. Whoever you work with is going to put a little piece of them inside of your project. That's at least how I like to think about it.
Oh, yeah, totally.
You know, it's kind of romantic in a sick way.
Today we are here with the amazingly talented Lindsey Kappa, who is going to answer the question that we are all wanting to know. What the fuck is a mix engineer? So, Lindsey, what is it? What do you do? What's a mix engineer?
So whenever somebody who isn't in the music industry asks me this, I ask them, you know how an album sounds when you listen to it, where there's effects, it sounds crisp, it just sounds done? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, that's the mixing engineer's job before the final mastering engineer, but that's a whole nother realm. But basically when I tell them that, they're like, oh, okay.
Nice. So for the kids at home, there's like stages to getting your music out into the world. Mm-hmm. And we talked with Rachel Field last week about what is a mastering engineer. So a mixing engineer is just the person who touches the tracks before they get to the mastering phase. And maybe a tracking engineer is the person who records the tracks for the mix. What are some things to keep in mind when you're going to make a record, you're going to make, top Billboard record right now, and you got all these songs in your head, and you're looking for a mix engineer? What do you need to look for when choosing the right mix engineer for what you do?
So I always say, first and foremost, look at your budget. That is one of the biggest things whenever you're going to be recording an album, because some people don't anticipate for, like, especially if you're going to have multiple engineers on the job, people need to keep that in mind. So get a budget down in your head that you know you can swing, maybe even like a range where you could be flexible in case like last minute things come up and you have to like pay for them because you're there, you can't avoid it, And then references, it doesn't matter if it's not your music. For example, I had a band that wanted me to mix them, and they said that they wanted to sound similar to Beck. And I was like, okay. So I looked at a collection of his works and got a feel for it. And because I've been doing this for a while, I can start to hear like, oh, they did this, they did that, and then kind of figure out how to do that. And one thing that's also really important is that when you are looking for a mixing engineer, see who their clientele is. Because if you're wanting to sound like Beck and you book a mixing engineer who's more familiar with like hip hop artists, that's probably not going to work out in your favor. So you want them to like be familiar with other bands like Spoon, Cage the Elephant, mixing engineers who have worked in that kind of realm. Just like indie rock or alternative will probably get the sound that you want faster and easier than somebody else who doesn't have that kind of background.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think, oh, well, if they're a mix engineer, they know how to mix every genre and every type of song. And that's just not true. Everybody has their niche of like what they specialize in and what sounds that they have in the back of their brain that they know immediately. Oh, I know how to get, Weezer's sound of the guitar tone. So you're going to want to work with me if you're in that kind of like indie, rock type of world, because those are the guitar tones you want. Whereas somebody who never mixes guitar because they only mix, like hard rap that doesn't have guitar in it, they're not going to know how to make those sounds. So yeah, the best thing that you can do is just go listen to their portfolio and say, okay, I've checked my budget, I can afford this person. Now I need to listen to their portfolio to make sure that their music kind of aligns with what I'm trying to do. You're awesomely talented. We've heard your work. If you haven't at home, go check it out. But what is what sets you apart as a mix engineer? What do you think your style is? Like what is it about you that makes your work special?
The thing that makes me stand out in a way, like especially when because I've worked with tons of other mixing engineers, and the huge difference that I've noticed is that I really try to make sure that, and I'm not like dissing anybody, is that I really like
Safe space, safe space.
yeah, is that I really do make an extra effort to make sure that the lows, the mids, and the highs are completely balanced. I hate, it drives me crazy, and I hear it a lot, especially in commercial music, surprisingly enough, when either A, the mids are heavy so where it sounds just like, I don't know, where I want more high end in a song, or B, the bass drum or whatever they use, whether it's an electronic drum kit, is too punchy and heavy to where when I have headphones in, that's all I hear.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's sometimes something too that a lot of mixing, well, not a lot, that's a really broad thing to say. Not a lot, but some mixing engineers don't consider is that, and and I say this because the mixing engineers that I've been lucky enough to work with, that I've been able to mentor with, have instilled this into me. I listen, before I put out a song, whether it's my own or whether, I'm sending it back to a client for them to listen to, I make sure I listen to it not only through my home studio monitors, but also the car, headphones. And I also work at 2 different recording studios where if one of them is open or available, I'll sneak in and listen to it on their monitors as well to see what kind of balance I have. Because I have JBL monitors, I love them. I love the brand. Sponsor, please.
Sponsor me too. I got the MKII 3K, whatever. I don't know, 5-inch.
It's honestly the most accurate monitor I've ever had, in my opinion.
And they're affordable.
That too.
Yeah.
And so you literally have to listen to multiple output sources in order to get an idea of how it's going to sound. Because let's face it, a regular fan member isn't going to be listening to this song through professional audio monitors
in a fully trained room.
Yeah, they're going to be listening to it through their headphones, their cell phone, their laptop, whatever it may be. And it's so important just to make sure that it's going to sound decent on all those types of platforms. Even like still to this day, I'll play just like WAV files on my cell phone to see if they sound okay through this like little crappy speaker.
Yeah.
And and if it does, great. It doesn't have to sound perfect because it's a cell phone.
Yeah.
But it needs at least to be close enough as it can be to the final product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell my clients that as well. Like, before you even talk revisions to me, go listen to it in your car, on your phone, with your headphones, wherever you normally listen to music, and really listen to it in all these different places before you come back and say, I want this changed or that changed. Just because you get like more of an idea of what your fans are going to be hearing. And so, yeah, that's totally important. So let's talk about the process, the mixing process. So let's say you recorded in your home studio, and the misconception I get a lot is that if I'm going to record at home, I have to know how to mix and master at home, which is not true. You can send your stems off to whoever you want to. But the process, so let's say that somebody records something at home and then they need it mixed. What is the process from their recording to you as a mix engineer? Before they approach me, like let's say they did hire a tracking engineer. For those of you who don't know, tracking engineers, most of the time their responsibility is just to try to get the best take, because it really does all start with the best take. I mean, sure, you could you can make something shitty sound fairly decent, but it just makes it 10 times easier when something already sounds good and then you're just
embellishing on that.
Mm-hmm.
Then once that's all done, when you send it to the mixing engineer, there has to be a couple things. One, it all has to not be clipping. That cannot, no files should ever be hitting red or even orange, honestly. Like maybe yellow if, you know, especially like with drums, like I think that you can get away with, but there has to be plenty of room for the mixing engineer to be compressing, to be boosting, limiting, whatever it may be, because the more headroom you're giving a mixing engineer, the cleaner, crisper, and just the more professional a file sounds, you know, because otherwise, like, what is the mixing engineer supposed to do when it's like already hitting like the top of the, you know, volume?
Yeah,
It's
I
like,
always tell people, I say, you know, I can always turn things up. I can't always turn things down. And
yeah.
so if you are recording and you're blowing it out, and I think that again with home recording becoming so popular, I think it's important to let people know these things because you know they think in their mind, well, it's not loud, or you know, I'm singing but it sounds really quiet. And it's like, well, that's okay, because what we have to do as mix engineers is we have to put a bunch of processing onto that, and we have to put compression and things that are going to turn up the volume of it. So it's important to give us lots and lots of room to be able to do those things so that you're not like handcuffing your mix engineer.
Yeah, exactly. And you also want to provide to them like as detailed as you possibly could be, almost a spreadsheet of your wants and needs for each song. Because the less a mixing engineer has to blow up your phone about questions, the better. You know,
Hmm.
it just makes it easier on everybody. It allows them to get an idea of what you want and put themselves a little into it. Because that's the thing too. When you're choosing a mixing engineer, the kind of sound that they create, that's gonna kind of be into you too. You know, that's what's really cool about the whole recording process as well. Whoever you work with is going to put a little piece of them inside of your project. That's at least how I like to think about it.
Oh
I
yeah,
think,
totally.
you know, it's kind of romantic in a sick way. Uh,
Yeah, and like that's why it's important too to listen to the portfolio of the person
mhm,
that you're hiring, because it is a really creative process. Mixing is very creative, and I don't think a lot of people understand that you could have 10 different people mix the same song and they're all going to sound completely different, and there's going to be different choices and different things like that. So and then it's you know, it's also important, let me know if you also think this. What I found is when you work for someone for the first time, that's when you're going to need really detailed notes and kind of like a spreadsheet and a lot of communication. But if you stick with your mix engineer, if you hire the same person over and over, they start to learn you, and then by the third or fourth or fifth song, they're not blowing up your phone because they say, "Oh well, so and so, you know, she didn't like this on this mix at this point. She told me to change that. So why would I make that choice again and just have her tell me to
mhm.
change that?" You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that's also kind of like the blessing and curse of being a musician and also an engineer, is
Yeah.
because I do have the ability to record my own music. I've been doing it for a long time. You know, obviously, like if I need help, you know, I'm finally at the point in my life now where I'm totally fine with that. Because back then I used to be like so stubborn, more so in my early 20s, because, you know, you're being a female in a male dominated field, you feel, you know, there's this constant need to prove yourself and not look
Mhm.
as naive, because I was also super young compared to like so many of the people I'd be with in the room. uh and so now I don't know, I still ask, don't get me wrong, I still ask for help, but the mixing stage I have to do it. It's so hard for me to find someone who does it exactly like how I like it. And
Mhm.
because I have such a clear vision in my head and I know how to go about it, I just want to do it because it's just going to be faster than trying to find a second party to do what I already know that I can do. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah.
Uh, so, which might still be a little bit stubborn in my ways, but you know, it's just luckily I've gotten to the point too where I've started paying a mastering engineer. You know, in the beginning I tried to do it myself and like For any of those of you who are watching, don't do that. It's not going to work out.
Yeah, yeah. Hire a professional to do what you don't know how to do. And if you want to learn, learn,
Mhm.
like put in the time and learn. But, I've had people send me, they ask me for a critique of their mix because I get that a lot. People just ask me for help, and I will. I'll listen to whoever's music that wants to send me to it. If I have a minute or three, I'll listen to it. And sometimes, I'll be like, hey, why don't you send me the multi tracks and I'll do a test mix? And it might be something that they've been working on for 5, 6 months. And then 2 hours later, I send it back to them and I'm like, hey, what do you think? And they're like, it took me 2 months to do that. How did you do that so quickly? But like, it's because there's years behind me, there's
Mhm.
years behind me of taking a month or 2 months
Yeah.
to mix a song. And
Yeah.
so, the more that you get into it, the easier it does become. And, I still have people that I have listen to my mixes that are my friends, like they're my listening buddies.
Oh,
And if I
absolutely.
get stuck and, I don't know what to do, I'll send it off to them and say, hey, can you listen to this for me? And they help me out. So, don't get frustrated if you have that vision in your head and you want to try to do it yourself. Just know that it takes time and you will have to
Mhm.
go through learning. I mean, how long have you been mixing, Lindsay?
If I count my college education, which I do because it was all
Yeah.
hands-on, I went to a really hippie school. Uh, 8 to 9 years now.
Yeah. And
It's
now you can crank out mixes, quickly, and you can edit really fast. I've watched you edit vocals in front of me in a 2-hour class in like 30 seconds. So it's like, give yourself some
Thanks,
grace.
Colt.
You gotta, give yourself some grace, and that it does take time to learn, and you're not going to do anything overnight. I mean, I've been a drummer for 27 years. I sucked
Mm,
at one point.
yeah, and it's so hard I feel like I'm sorry, I would hate to be a kid during this time because I feel like, especially with apps like TikTok, Instagram, all this stuff, you really don't see the process. Like, back in the day when we were younger, we saw like we had behind the scenes DVDs of like some of our favorite bands, where they would show you the album process, or like, on YouTube, there would be like, hey, tour day number 20, like this is where we are. It would
Hmm.
show like the nitty gritty of everything. But now it's like there's all these filters, like there's these going viral based off of 6 seconds, and it's just
Hmm.
like, it just, personally, I think it puts this message out there that says you're not allowed to make mistakes.
Mm.
You have to be great right off the bat. And sometimes I'm guilty of thinking that too. I literally, because I think I told you, when COVID happened, I got a DJ job.
I don't think so. I don't think I've heard this story.
Yeah, so fun fact, I got a DJ job, which also I do, which which I also use my mixing techniques into, except it's a little different because I'm mixing on the spot, uh,
Mm.
which is so different for me. I mean, I do live sound as well, but I feel like there's more room for that versus like DJing, which changes song by song, like after 2 minutes. Uh, and I'm trying to rewire my brain because I mean, when you're in the recording studio and you're whatever engineer it may be, tracking, mixing, mastering, there's no room for mistakes.
Hmm.
You better get that take in like the first or the second shot. Anything after that, you are wasting time and money.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's so much pressure on you, and that difference is what's going to make or break your referral to another client or just to anybody else in the industry. And so trying to not erase it completely, because I do believe that mentality has gotten me where I am today. uh it's also hard to not think that way in regards to when I'm DJing, because there is a little, you could make a mistake and nobody notices,
Hmm.
but then I know it. And then
Yeah.
I have this problem with thinking like, oh my God, I'm a failure. Why am I doing this? Like, oh my God, I'm not giving my best, which is so toxic. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, but the TikTok's like a minute, not even like 15 to
Not
30
even, it's
seconds.
like the new Musically or whatever it was, fucking called.
Vine, was it? Vine.
Yeah, Vine, one of those.
Yeah, one of those. But yeah, like Instagram, you get 59 seconds, and it's like, you don't see me sitting in here by myself for hours trying to get
Mhm.
a troublesome vocal, or trying to,
Yeah.
figure out, okay, well, this vocalist is really SE, like, what do I do? And so, like, all
Hmm.
you hear is what is on Spotify, and you think, oh, this is great. So and so put out an album, and I like playing it, but there's so much that goes into it. So yeah,
Hmm.
it is about, I mean, I'm glad you brought this up. It is about giving yourself some grace in an age where it doesn't
Hmm.
appear that anyone is doing anything that
Hmm.
takes a long time.
Yeah. And also, it's just like, I think it also comes down to, I don't know, maybe credibility as well.
Hmm.
You know, uh, there are so many, I kind of wish that engineers were talked about more so. I mean, it's definitely coming out more and more now that we
Hmm.
have platforms to do so, just like, this web series, Omni Sound Project, they're putting the message out there. But I wish it would even go further, because the trouble that I sometimes find too is people think that because of the technology we have, that they can call, God, I'm going to sound so shitty, uh, that the term mixing engineer, I feel like, has been thrown around so loosely more than ever.
Hmm.
I don't know. Do you feel like you can agree with that, or maybe
Yeah,
not?
and I think there's just a misconception. I think people think, okay, because there's so much in the box now, that people aren't educated and any Joe Schmo can do it if they just make the right purchase, which
Yes, yeah, and like,
that isn't correct, because
yeah, I feel like the roles of producer and mixing engineer are the ones that are commonly mixed up.
mhm,
It was an EDM artist, and I was happy to see he was listed as producer, even though he makes a lot of his own music in his laptop. But that's what producing is,
mhm,
because he probably sends those mixes to a mixing engineer who
mhm,
then can make it sound professional, who makes it sound like it didn't just come right out of your laptop.
right.
And I was happy to see that, just, because of what we're talking about now.
The day I'm filming this is the day that the first show came out. Well, Cinnamon and I talked about what is a producer, and at the very end, we said make sure that you ask your producer if they mix, because they're not
Mhm.
always the same person.
Yeah, and so many people like kind of blend them together. Honestly, people blend all engineers together sometimes. And
Hmm.
sometimes that could be the case. There are people out there, they're unicorns, but they're but they're out there, and they're doing it from the very beginning to the very end, which is totally admirable and absolutely incredible. I once wanted to be like that, but then when I saw the amount of work that goes into mastering engineering and the amount of codes and stuff that you have to keep track of, I was like, I'm out.
It all goes back to your budget. So I'm a person who, I am definitely not the low price leader. I'm not the Walmart of mix engineers, but I do usually, I'm not on Fiverr. So, but because a lot of my clients are very new to recording and they're very budget conscious, and because I worked with marginalized folks, and there is no more marginalized folks than people who are making minimum wage and trying to get their song out there. And I tell people all the time, don't let money stop you. I have payment plans. I have whatever you need. Let's do it. So I am a person that sometimes I mix, produce, master, the whole deal, because I'm trying to help them, and I explain everything, like, yes, I can master. Is it going to have every code in it? No. Is it going to be a professional person who listened to that separate from me and did all this detailed work? No. But can you put it on Spotify and it'll match the levels and the bumping of the other songs on there? Yes, it will. If you have the budget for it, get a separate producer, get a separate mix engineer, get a tracking engineer, and get a mastering engineer if you have the budget for it.
That's also one thing that still irritates me to this day. And I'm sure like everybody gets irritated, like any job. People in the engineering world should be getting paid more.
Hmm.
It's just a fact. Like,
Hmm.
and minimum wage too, of course. Like, I mean, we're all being underpaid, let's be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
But I mean, just because of in regards to how much work we really do put in, there are times where we're at it for weeks, months, depending on like how heavily involved you are in the project and how long it's taking. And I don't think a lot of people put that into account, that we are literally, no, I don't want to say stopping our lives, but really like putting our lives into this, you know, because it's not like a 9 to 5 job where, you know, you go in, you do what you're asked, you clock out, and then you're back to, you know, what you want to do. It's like, no, this is also what we want to do. So, you know, the line between passion and job is really like kind of blended.
Going back to that, any purchase that you make can make you a mixing engineer. Why that's not true is mostly what you are paying for when you pay a mixing engineer is for their ears. You're paying for their ears, and you're paying for their creative decision making and their ability to critically listen to from 10 to 100 different tracks all on the screen. And if you just turn those all to the same volume and put them straight up the middle, it sounds a mess. It sounds a mess. And you go at home, you go, why does this sound bad? I record everything perfectly. And so it's our ear to brain, like, bam. Oh, that's a frequency that sounds weird in this mix.
Yeah.
How do I know that? Well, it's because I put hours and hours and hours and hours into critical listening. And so, you know, it's not that if it takes us a day or two to mix your song, we shouldn't get paid as much as if it takes us a week. It's all those years of training beforehand, like your doctor. You're not paying your doctor because you went in there for 20 minutes and they tapped your knee and it bounced and they said you were good. You're paying for their whole 25 years of education or whatever it is.
Their investment, basically, the fact that they invested so much of themselves. It's almost like a rewiring too when you have to do revisions, because then there's problem solving in it as well. You're like, okay, they didn't like this. What didn't they like about it? Okay, how am I going to still maintain the emotion and vision of the song, but without this, and then putting something else to maintain what we started with.
And you have to kind of be a translator, because they say things like, I want it to be more sparkly. And then you have to figure out in your head, like, what do they mean? And then you're like, okay, send me a song where you like the guitar tone. And again, send me another one. And they're like, okay, well, I kind of like this, but more this or that. And so you kind of have to always play. They're never going to say, yeah, so I'm going to need you to take that guitar. I'm going to need you to cut 5K and then you're going to boost 200. And then that should work for me on the guitar tone. Like, no, those aren't the mix notes we're getting.
And like, I'm also like, I'm definitely a person too who listens to the lyrics. Because don't get me wrong, there's some people who want their sad songs to sound happy. Which, I mean, we've seen it millions of times. Like, but like one time with a buddy of mine, and he put out this song called Sync. Scott Collins, check him out. But he wanted me to record like a side B version of it, which I was more than happy to do, because we both like a lot of like the singer songwriter kind of like, you know, like Nova Amor is like a really big one. Suv John Stevens, kind of like that melancholy songwriter.
Yeah.
And so when he was singing, when I heard the demo version of it, of Sync, I was like, oh man, I think it would be really cool if the reverb almost sounded like it was underwater. Because the song's called Sync. Yeah. So if it had a water vibe to it, that would really like kind of sell the whole message. So I did that. And luckily he grasped right onto it, because he was like, it sounds underwater. And I was like, that's why I chose it. And he was like, oh my God, that's so cool. So, you know, and then we kind of added some ethereal stuff to it too, because like, you know, when you're underwater, like, you know, that moment when you're underwater and like everything's at peace. That was like kind of what we also were like trying to get a mood for too. So we added some ethereal synths and things to kind of help with that mood. So it really is. It's true when they say music is a language.
So that's our take on that's Lindsey Kappa's take, and my take on what a mix engineer does. And
I feel like we went so many different directions.
we did, but that's part of it. It's the creative process. What goes through our brains. There's no right or wrong way to mix. There's a few wrong things you can do to make things like clipping and whatever.
And deverb.
Yeah, and lots of pre-delay. But you know, there are things that you can do. But there is no wrong or right way. If it sounds good, it is good. And let's say that I recorded something at a studio, or I record at home, and I want Lindsey Kappa to mix my song so it sounds incredible, and I want to sound just like Beck. How do I get a hold of you? How do I follow you to get that?
So my musician name, but I also, I put engineering stuff on it too, is @bad@being-a-girl on Instagram. I have a website too. I am lindseyKappa.com. I'll send you some stuff to.
Yeah, we'll throw all this down in the description.
Down
below. What you do is you click the subscribe, and then you click the like.
You like the video, you put notifications on, and then
and then you click the bell where they say click the bell. I'm so bad at that. Like I never ask people to subscribe. If you like me, subscribe. If you don't, hit the thumbs down button twice. And then go down.
That's not how you do it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate your time, and your insights are so wonderful in the music industry. And again, it was just lovely to chat with you today.
Oh, you too. Thank you for asking me to do this. I always love doing these podcasts and series because I just love to talk. That's really what we get down to.
I do too. I like to hear myself talk. I mean, who are we kidding? All right.